perhaps we give a 5-minute delay on our window here just to get our panelists in the room?
Sure.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, if we end up with kind of this size group, we could probably bring the attendees up to panelists.
Agreed.
Yep. No, I see Noah's there. Mark's in, and Jim McIntyre. Yep.
It's creeping up.
Thanks for joining, everyone. We're going to delay by just a couple of minutes here to get everybody joined into the WebEx room. If you've got your slideshow ready, we could probably get that on the screen if you're ready for that.
Okay. Dick, you want to pull that up?
I'm almost there.
Okay.
A little different than Zoom, so it takes me a half a second longer, but there we go.
Gotcha.
Should have it, right?
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Oh, I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just some pre-meeting information for our call-in users. I see we have at least one of them. We have a virtual raise your hand if you're on the call. So if you press *3 on your phone, we see you have raised your hand, and that means that you have something to say. At that time, the facilitator or host, Mr. Harris, will unmute you. Okay, we're at 6:05. Probably enough time to get everybody to get in here. And I just want to open by saying thank you for everyone for participating. I'd like to immediately hand this over to Karen Affeld, who's the NOC Executive Director, who's going to introduce our panelists from CBG. And we'll get into some slides, and then from there, it'll be self-evident as the direction we're going. So again, thank you for coming, and we appreciate your participation. With that, Karen.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'd like to introduce Tom Robinson, who is the overall project manager for CBG Communications. They are the consultants who are leading the planning and feasibility study process for Clallam County. Okay. Tom, do you want to introduce the team?
Sure. Thank you, Karen. My name is Tom Robinson. I'm the president and CEO of CBG Communications. We were hired by a consortium of the municipalities, Clallam County, the port, and a number of other interested parties to perform a broadband feasibility study and work with a community broadband team. We've been doing that, started the work in earnest in the May timeframe, and are now at the point, and we'll show you kind of the project roadmap a little later on, at the point of holding these community broadband meetings. We had one last week virtually with representatives from Forks and the western end of the county. We're kind of working our way east, and tonight in Port Angeles, and tomorrow with Sequim. At this point, I'll introduce Dick Nielsen. He's our senior engineer. Dick, you want to just say hi?
Hi. Yeah, Dick Nielsen. I'm out in the St. Paul office. As Tom said, I'm the senior engineer. I work more on the infrastructure side, talking to the anchor institutes and providers and so on and so forth. So, as well as everything else, but that's more my focus. So.
Yeah, and Dick will be leading us through some of the more technical parts of the discussion tonight. And then Connie Book, Dr. Constance Book, who's our lead researcher. She's president of Telecommunications Research Corporation, and she'll be leading us through some of the discussions on adoption and other kinds of issues related to broadband. Connie?
Hi, everybody. Looking forward to hearing about how you use broadband and how you don't and why you don't. So looking forward to our conversation this evening.
Okay, and we have some local stakeholders with us tonight to serve as panelists with us, as well as participants both in the WebEx and the webinar and the telephone call-in. So what I'd like to do is have our other panelists introduce themselves. Let me just start with Jim, if I could, with you, Jim McIntyre. Let's see, Jim, I think you got to unmute your microphone.
Here we go.
Okay.
Am I there?
Yes, yes.
I am here. I am here. Yeah, this is a little different than Zoom. I know how to unmute in Zoom, but yeah, I'm here representing the Port Angeles Business Association. We, of course, have a great interest in the economic booster potential, I guess, if I could say it that way, of broadband throughout the county. There's an interesting occurrence happening with the Hoh tribe out on the west end of Jefferson County that we're aware of, and we're just kind of wondering if that could be a harbinger of a technological way to get broadband into places where it isn't right now. It's there for something of a price in certain parts of the county. I live in north of Sequim, so broadband is available here if you have the wherewithal to pay for it. But there's many places, as you undoubtedly know, where that's not available throughout the county, particularly on the west end. So we see a great economic multiplier effect of broadband. So we're interested in seeing how we can support whatever efforts are underway here to get that done.
Okay. All right. Great. No, we're glad to have you participate, and we'll actually talk about Starlink a little bit later in the discussion. Okay, Mark.
Hi, it's Mark Abshire. I'm the Executive Director of the Port Angeles Chamber of Commerce. Happy to be on this panel. This is an important topic. As Jim said, one issue is getting broadband to people that don't have it. In Port Angeles, most people have it. So the issue here is more about bandwidth and speeds. So that's kind of going to be the focus of my interest, I think, is things that we can do to improve our bandwidth.
Okay. Great. All right. Thank you. Noah.
I'm Noah Glad, the director of the North Olympic Library System, and I was on the call last week for the Forks West End area, and we do have branches in Forks and Clallam Bay, as well as Port Angeles and Sequim, so we do have an interest across the county, and we provide a lot of internet access, either through the free Wi-Fi we provide at each of our branches, or the public computers we provide as well when we're able to open to the public. And I think it's a pretty big equity issue in providing that access, even in communities like Port Angeles, where there is kind of more reliable internet access. We still find that the cost is pretty prohibitive for a lot of residents in Port Angeles, and there's still access issues for sure, I think, in the areas around the city, kind of in between Port Angeles and Sequim and the foothills, and we hear that a lot from employees and just the public, where they can't get good internet access where they're at right now. So we're definitely interested in increased speeds, of course, and lowering cost, and just providing better access to the community.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Thank you, Noah. Let's see, Todd. I've got to change my screen a little bit, but
it looks like we've got two more panelists that have joined us as well, Tom. Mary Jane, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Okay.
Sorry, I too was struggling with how to unmute in this particular platform. Mary Jane Robbins, I am Representative Kilmer's district staffer for Clallam and Jefferson counties. And thank you for letting me listen in again to tonight's presentation to hear what folks in the Port Angeles area have to say.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Mary Jane. And looks like we have Councilmember Carr, Navarro, if you'd like to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know this has been a labor of love for so many people, and a lot of hard work has gone into this, and it's really exciting to get to hear from our community and, really be able to hear broader perspectives in this work, and it's really exciting to be a part of that. So thanks for having me.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, Navarro. And Navarro and Todd are both part of our community broadband team. So glad to have you here. All right. And I know there's other attendees. And as we go through the discussion, we'd be happy to pull you in as you have things that you want to discuss with us as we go through. All right. Let's see, Dick, if you could go to the next slide. Let's see, Todd, I do see somebody with their hand up. Caller 3 has their hand raised from Port Angeles.
I see that. Yeah, if we could get caller and user number 3 unmuted, go ahead.
Oh. Yeah, go ahead. Whoever raised their hand?
Yeah, Dave Anderson, Clallam PUD.
Oh, hi, Dave. Glad you could join us.
Yeah, I'm on the phone tonight instead of on the video like I was last week. So.
Okay. All right, we'll certainly be coming to you for part of the discussion, knowing that I think you're the representative for the PUD's Port Angeles district, correct?
The east side of Port Angeles and the west side of Sequim is my area, yes, District 2.
Okay,
so I'm going to be attending all 3 meetings. So.
Okay, good. And Dave is also on our community broadband team. So we've got a super team with a lot of expertise and enthusiasm, and so I'm glad a lot of them are here tonight. Okay, all right. So I had moved to the next slide, and this is the website that we developed for the community broadband team. It has a number of resources. It's on the NODC's site as a subpage, very easy to get to. And I'll just defer to Karen real quick to talk about it and how you can navigate to it. Karen, you want to jump in here?
Sure. So our website is noprcd.org. Our full name is the North Olympic Peninsula Resource Conservation and Development Council, which is a mouthful, which is why we go by NODC. So noprcd.org. And then the page that it's on is Clallam Broadband Team. So you can type that whole link in directly. You can see it on the slide, noprcd.org/Clallam-broadband-team. Or you can just go to noprcd.org, look for our broadband initiative, and there'll be a drop down where you can find the Clallam County Community Broadband Team page. There are a variety of resources on the page. There's a little bit of information about how we got going, who's on the team. You'll find the draft vision and goals statement. There's a survey that you can take that will give us some information that's useful. There's a link to the state's broadband speed test, which is really important for us to get as many people in Clallam County as possible to take the state's speed test and survey, so that we'll get a little dot on the map that shows what kind of speeds we have where across the county and within Port Angeles. Really useful for us as documentation when we go after funding, and also to make decisions about what projects to do first. And then any events that we have, and also a link where you can just send an email to us with questions or comments. So it's kind of the one-stop shop where you can find out information about what we're doing and where we're planning to go from here.
Okay.
Just add to that, Karen, the city of Port Angeles has put a banner on their front page that links directly to this site, and it'll remain up there for a while so we can get people directed over there. But if you go to cityofpa.us, there's a banner right in the middle.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Karen. And one of the things that's really important is the data to be developed over the course of the project, and that includes the state speed test data that will be really helpful to the state, but also for the state for directing efforts, funding, et cetera, towards broadband projects. And then we have a survey that's part of the process as well, and we'll talk about that a little more, but it's designed really to go over the same issues that we're going to discuss tonight, and can be used by any resident or business to provide data back to us. So we'd encourage you to connect them to the website and connect them to these resources so they can provide us with as much data as we can get all across the county. Okay. All right. So Dick, if you could go to the next slide. So tonight, and we'll just go through these real quickly. Tonight, we're talking about Port Angeles, but not just Port Angeles. I think as one panelist indicated, there's a lot of broadband capability in Port Angeles, and so bandwidth may be more of the issue here, but outside of Port Angeles, so say, Dick, the next slide, where we start to get into the urban growth area, and then beyond that into more of the, the central part of the county. That's where we have a lot of issues that are basic broadband related, and developing broadband services within those areas. One of the studies that we're looking at and sort of building upon was done back in 2014. It was mostly for the western end of the county, but it also covered part of the central part of the county. And Dick, if you want to bring up that slide, there they actually tracked the provision of services and different types of services, whether fiber-based or cable modem-based or DSL-based, and where service was available, trying to identify the gaps. That's part of our project. Is to update what was done back in 2014 and to add to the data set, because I don't believe they looked at the eastern part of the county. But another part of that are service levels. As again, one person said, it's not just broadband, it's the bandwidth. And we'll talk about the state's goals and what we're working to try to achieve in just a second. One of the things that was done early on by the team was to develop a mission statement. That's part of the Community Economic Revitalization Board, the CERB requirements. And one of the things we need to do is vet that vision statement in meetings like these. So here I'll turn it over to Connie, and Connie will kind of walk us through the vision statement and the goals that were developed, and who this study is aimed at, and what its high aims are. So Connie?
Thanks, Tom. And really what we're looking for is to ensure that that you all believe that this captures fully and you're in agreement with this vision statement for the county. So in this one, the overarching talks recognizes that there has been good work done in order to expand broadband, right? This is not the first effort. In our Forks meeting, they called it 3.0. And to recognize that folks had been at it for a long time. And hopefully you identify with one of the stakeholders in the group. I was listening to who was attending. I think everybody falls within this, within those entities that this effort is designed to embrace. And then as we go through the vision really articulates high capacity broadband infrastructure that is affordable and available to each of these entities. And that really is where we're focused. We recognize that there are several different levels of service in the area, and working to ensure that everyone has the ability to access affordable high capacity broadband. To achieve that vision, you can see the articulation of a total of 8 different priorities there. I will say that several of them focus on digital inclusion, affordability, access. We recognize the need for this in terms of small businesses and further economic development. I think we've all had a new awareness just as this project was kicking off about public health, telemedicine, and the need for broadband services just from a fundamental health care, but also public safety, being able to communicate, widespread communication, especially with the disaggregated media that we've experienced in the last few years. So not everyone's watching the same television newscast anymore. And so the power of the internet to be able to get everyone fully informed about public safety and public health issues. And some of the other articulated areas are around education. We can see the power of telelearning, even at the pre-K through 12 level. When we wrote that, we were thinking about higher education largely, but now we realize that with COVID-19, some of the pre-K through 12 efforts having to move online. So these are the rest of the areas around government services. And then the other characteristic that the community focused on was redundancy of the network, that it need whatever is an outcome of this effort, that attention needs to be paid to having redundancy, a resilient broadband network, so that should there be any impact on that network, that there was a way to quickly restore services that folks had become dependent on in terms of the broadband delivery of those services. So that was the community's vision statement and how it would be actualized. And I wanted to pause here and get feedback and see if you all believe this captures your need, or if you see an area this might be improved.
So this is Mark Abshire. My only thought is it's great. I think it's very comprehensive. I think you guys have covered most of the areas. I really like the resiliency piece. The one area that I question is what is the definition of high capacity? And this kind of goes to my statement before about bandwidth, because I think high capacity is a relative thing, I believe, throughout the world. And so one person's high capacity is not another person's. And so there might be a way to actually word this that puts it, and I'm thinking of the word maybe competitive, a competitive, with competitive speeds or something. Something like, I don't know, just something to kind of put a little more context around what could be a movable definition of the term high capacity.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of the things we think about too is aspirations there. You know, that you've got enough bandwidth to what you aspire to do, not just what you need to do, and how we could reflect that.
I think too, it becomes very interesting in a county like Clallam County, where, and especially the west end where it's most visible, you have people that literally have dial-up and they have nothing else. They have to get in the car and drive to the top of a hill to get cell service or to a hotspot somewhere. And then you get over towards Port Angeles and Sequim, and there are some people that have 1 gig symmetrical service. So to your point exactly, it's all different issues throughout the county, and on the west end, somebody got 10 meg by 2 or 3 up, they'd be pretty happy right now, so it's all over the place for sure.
I think too, to add that a little bit, there is a definition of broadband according to the state of Washington.
Actually, right here, right. I didn't want to get away.
That's our next slide. Yeah, that's
but we can come back to the vision statement if we have other people that want to jump in. But here are the goals. I guess I'll just read them off. The state goal for the next few years out to 2024 is 3 meg up and 25 meg down. A lot of times people will say those the opposite direction, but that, to Mark's point, that for a lot of people that's really good, but where I am, that would be considered subpar. It's still considered broadband, but it wouldn't be what a bigger city would provide to customers. By the year 2026, all anchor institutes, which of course is schools, city halls, public works, all those types of facilities, should have 1 gig symmetrical available to them. So that's 5.5 years from now, they should have gigabit service available to them. And that's doable as long as you get fiber there. But the next one gets real tricky. It's 7.5 years out. Technology will have changed quite a bit by then. But 100 megabits download is not a huge number, but upload is, it's impractical. But in today's world, with exception really of fiber to the home, cable modem speeds can't hit 100 upstream or upload. Certainly DSL and most practical wireless solutions can't hit those speeds. So those are the goals of the state.
And those were written before the pandemic, and we are seeing a lot of accelerated conversation at the federal and states level about the inherent value that broadband has created during the pandemic. We've had a lot more conversation about underserved areas. And we already 1 round of federal funding as part of the CARES Act. And so I do think these will be revisited by all states and the federal definition at the FCC in light of what we've experienced.
Let me just finish my point by sharing. I got an email about a week ago from a gentleman who he and his wife are looking to move to the northwest, and they were trying to find a place to move there. And they have like an online business that requires access to high-speed internet. And he asked me, what our bandwidth was in these parts. And I basically told him, I said, I'll do a speed test. And so I did a speed test, and I got almost 100 download from my office. And I told him that, and he said, okay, well, that's nice, but I can get 1 gigabyte in Anacortes, so we're going to move to Anacortes. So, that's just it's anecdotal, but it's an indication of what I'm talking about in terms of attracting businesses to this area. They're going to be looking for, I think, levels that are above the state broadband goals. And I'm not saying that this project needs to do that, but what I'm getting at is that maybe the vision statement should say something like meet or exceed the state broadband goals, or something like that, and rather than just the relatively vague term of high capacity. So I'll be quiet on that topic now. I think you guys got it.
No, the other thing though is, yeah, to some degree we've got it, but we need to keep hearing it. Let's reinforce it, because anecdotal isn't good enough. We need to have people tell us exactly what you're telling us. So,
at the risk of jumping ahead in the presentation, this is Jim McIntyre. Let me just observe that I think that these state broadband goals, as displayed in the slide here, are assumed without resource constraints. I mean, if every single citizen, no matter where situated in Washington state, is going to see these numbers here, it's going to cost different things in different places. So when you put costs into the equation, we're going to have a different conversation here. And so piggybacking on what Mark said, if you choose to live in a place where it's very costly to get internet service to you, given current technology, now tomorrow's technology may be different and the cost may be entirely different, but that's an individual choice, and you have to make the choice based on what your individual needs are. If you want to do business with 1 gig, then you're going to have to, that rules out certain places in Clallam County where you can live. So that's an important consideration, I think, going forward. But from an initial standpoint, as far as a goal for the entire county, no matter where people are situated, let's understand where this conversation is going to have to go in the ultimate.
If in your mind, do you have some kind of priority ranking?
I don't, I'm not technology adept enough and I don't understand the world of broadband, as for instance, Dave Anderson from PUD must or might. But the idea, I'm thinking of several historical analogies. One being the rural electrification initiative back in the, 20s and 30s, where the federal government capitalized electrifying rural places in America so that people who had no electricity other than what they could generate for themselves, had public power supplied to them. So that's an analogy about how to capitalize sort of the basic level of broadband service, no matter where situated. And the other aspect is certain counties in the West in particular have built into their county codes a statement that if you live in this particular county, you're going to have to understand that police services, fire services, public services of any of any description might not necessarily be instantaneously available as they might be in a urban area. So if you make an informed choice about where you decide to live and what you're willing to tolerate in terms of the kind and the quantity and the quality of the services that you want, knowing that there's a certain level that we as a society want to achieve, but we can't give everybody everything all the time in the same quantity and quality, because that goes beyond our ability to provide resources for it. So, as this conversation evolves, I think there's going to have to be some sort of qualitative understanding of rural areas versus urban areas, or areas that are close to trunk lines, as it were. And I'm probably using the wrong language to describe this, but a broad pipe for high-speed internet might not necessarily be cost effective to deliver every single place in the county. So that's the sort of a business perspective demands some sort of rationality to geography versus quality and quantity of service. But we need to consider at least some sort of basic level of service every place in the county, because it's kind of like electricity was in the 20s and 30s. Internet at some level of speed is kind of like electricity was back in those days. So that's the not conundrum, but that's the ultimate way to effectuate this vision and these particular goals here.
And that is the state's goal.
Yeah,
is to offer this, what they describe as baseline, with these 3 goals.
Yep.
But I agree, each, and part of the reason to have the separate discussions across the county is recognizing the assets of each of the areas of the county and wanting to be able to articulate the uniqueness of those needs separately in our efforts with the state and for future grant writing.
And I apologize if I've hijacked the discussion, but this particular set of goals kind of triggered that cascade of thoughts from me.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Connie.
Well, I was just going to say we probably need to move to the next topic, but if any other folks have come, you can put into the chat if you have any other, or put it in the Q&A, any other thoughts on the vision statement.
Right. And I was going to say, one of the things you can do is, again, go to the broadband team's website, and the vision's posted there, and there's a place where you can make comments on the vision, as well as the next thing we're going to talk about, which is the roadmap. Dick, you want to go ahead and pull that up? And I know it's hard to see if you got a small screen like I do, so I'm actually going to look on my paper copy. But essentially, this tracks the project from its very inception to what the end game looks like, and where we're at right now. And Dick, if you could just put the cursor on that.
Yeah, right here.
Perfect. Thank you. So we did a lot of work individually with the different jurisdictions. And you can see there's 3 basic pieces that go into this. One is the needs assessment piece, and we're now at the point of having the community broadband meetings, and have also talked to the tribes. You'll see the tribes have a dotted line there. They're all embarked on different activities, and we've been talking to them about these different activities, seeing how we can leverage some of their experiences and potentially how those impact what we want to do for the county as a whole. And then on the top of the piece are those with current infrastructure and trying to map that and get a good feel for what's out there as far as infrastructure and service levels, what can be leveraged. And then at the bottom are the providers, and Dick's been making his way, talking to different providers and determining what their capabilities are and what some of their plans are for the future. And from this meeting and tomorrow's in Sequim, we'll have a set of data based on everything we've gathered so far that we'll hope to be able to then do some of these gap maps. In other words, map infrastructure, anchor institutions, which are the ones intended for the 1 gigabit service by 2026, according to the state's goals. And also look at where there is no service at all, except potentially dial-up, or it could be internet service, but not broadband, not the 3/25. So once we map those gaps, the goal will be to, and Dick, you can go to the next slide, to then carry it forward. And you can see that we put the state's goals into, Dick, you want to highlight that box as, our goals initially. And from that, developing some scenarios. So you'll see the mapping part go up. Those are the scenarios. You'll see everything feeding into those blocks. And then coming out of that are different types of documentation related to recommended scenarios for going forward to meet the goals of the vision, taking into account all the things that we're discussing as part of the needs assessment and the state's goals. And you can see, so there's business planning that we have to look at and projections. There's operational considerations, looking at 3 types of operating models, a public model, a private model, and a public-private partnership model. And our experience has been that, especially in a place like Clallam, where you do have a wide variance in what's currently out there, that you're probably going to end up with a network of networks, things that work differently in different places, to try to bring, as we've been discussing, some sort of baseline to everybody, and then areas where it may be possible to take what's currently there and increase bandwidth, and then over time expand services out. Based on return on investment and other factors that go into the business model. We'll develop those. That'll be in that sort of middle box in that diagram in the roadmap. We'll go up. We'll vet them with the team first, but then our final thing is to vet it with the public. And the way that's typically done is we'll come back through, and those of you that have participated, like we told the folks in Forks, this is just kind of the beginning of how we want to get your involvement in this process. What we want to do is vet those with you, get as wide spread input as we can, and then the team determine what will be the sort of final plan going forward and how that will work. As Karen can tell you, this kind of data then will help support grant funds, loan applications, whatever it may be. We're all hoping that, once the, who knows when it will settle down, but at some point in 2021, that new rounds of funding will become available from the federal government. Funding was just available for some projects from the state, from the Public Works Board. We know that many people applied, and I think there were only 4. Dick, you know more about that than I do, that were funded. But again, the state, continues to look for funds to be able to support that. So part of that will be a sustainability model. How can whatever we believe is the right way to move forward, and you can see that those sort of 4 lines moving forward, which could be a different line for different parts of the county, or it could have some common threads and have some different pieces. How will that be sustainable? That's really key. You know, like we told the people in Forks, we don't want them to have to go to broadband 4.0. We want them to be able to go to broadband 3.1 and 3.2 and 3.3, you know, whatever it might be. Okay, so any thoughts on that? I know that's a lot to digest in a short period of time. And again, you can make comments on this. It is available through the website. But any initial thoughts on the roadmap? Does it seem like a logical flow? Is there anything we've missed looking at?
I have one question for you, Tom.
Sure.
What have the anchor institutions been defined?
Yes, yeah. Both the state and the federal government define the anchor institutions, and those are essentially public institutions. So it includes all elementary and secondary schools. It includes all higher education institutions. It includes all libraries. It includes all government facilities, state, local, federal. And I believe it includes hospitals, but don't hold me to that. I might be wrong about that. It includes all fire and rescue, emergency management, public safety locations. So pretty much anything you can think of as quote, an institution is in that state designation.
Okay, great. And that just sort of goes along with one of my thoughts that I was going to share with Connie about the 8 parts of the vision. The medical/health is not really, healthcare is not really mentioned in there. I don't know if it needs to be. If it's considered an anchor institution, then it's already covered. You don't have to worry about it. But you know, access for our medical facilities is probably a pretty big deal.
Yeah, we can make a note of that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's in the vision statement you're talking?
Yeah, it's not in the vision statement. I didn't see.
Right here, I think.
We might have zoomed through it, or Dick, it might be combined. I'm sorry, combined with public health.
Public health.
I jumped over that one a little fast, I think.
There it is. Okay, it's there.
Good idea, though.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, and actually, we were hoping some of the medical folks would be here this evening because once we get into sort of the next part of this process, which actually will be in the next slide, is we wanted to discuss the 3 big applications that are really driving internet use and bandwidth these days. Connie's going to spend some time talking about that: telework, telehealth, and teleeducation. But Dick, you want to, before we do that, we wanted to kind of get a baseline. One of our jobs, so that would be the next slide. One of our jobs is to really determine what's going on in these areas. And, you know, we've been talking to Todd and the folks at Port Angeles. We've been working and trying to get more information from providers, you know, like Wave and CenturyLink. But Dick, you want to kind of walk through this and let's see if we can get kind of a range from all the participants tonight on where we're at, you know, as far as existing service levels, service providers, and technologies.
Right, and this is kind of a process of, again, taking some stuff that we know anecdotally to date and putting some real examples to it. So if the people that are on the call or on the Zoom, not Zoom, but anyway, if the people that are here from the city proper can weigh in on this, and then the people just outside the city, and again, the people even further out that probably have the least amount of service. Talk about the providers that you're getting service from or can get service from. What kind of technologies are they using, at least as best we know? You know, is it cellular? Is it fiber to the home, cable TV, DSL, and so on and so forth? And then what are the providers' names? You know, we know some of the big ones. Once in a while we hear one that we hadn't heard before. So anybody want to weigh in on what they have now or don't have? Where you're located?
Just a reminder to everyone too that if you are on as a participant, you can raise your virtual hand. And if you are a call-in user, *3 on your phone will raise your hand for us.
Thanks, Doug.
And if you'd like, I could probably start off my experience personally.
Okay, we'll take that.
Live here in town, not too far from City Hall here, and have Wave broadband available as well as CenturyLink fiber. I've been told I can get up to gig speeds. I currently have 250 meg, which satisfies my family's needs. My wife and I recently bought some property up off of Old Mill Road, which is 3.1 miles from town, and there is nothing available.
Okay.
It's about a quarter of a mile from our new property build site to the nearest Wave connection. And I've been told that that is a possibility, but I would have to work with the business group at Wave. You know, inquiring as to who else can provide up there. CenturyLink does have phone lines, but again, there's technology that would have to be involved that is outside of what CenturyLink provides in order to get broadband over copper. And that's just anecdotal from my experience in technology, that you can, with enough copper, transport fairly high bandwidth. But it does take specialized equipment, and it does take someone like my expertise to be able to put that together for you. So, you know, and maybe that's a discussion we can have about broadband providers accelerating some of that technology to be able to utilize existing infrastructure. To port things over, and I'm just going to throw these out, but to port maybe broadband over our power lines. You know, this is a technology that's been in place for quite a while, and my ears kind of perked up when we started talking about the 20s and the electrification of the United States. You know, 99.9% of the households have public power. You know, and that's something to think about. And Starlink is really exciting as well. I know our group has talked a lot about that, but that's my personal experience. So, and I see we have someone raise their hand, Joe, over on the attendee list. If you can unmute him, please, host.
Oh yeah, hi. My name's Joe Calera. I'm a physician at Olympic Medical Center, but I live up at Lake Dawn. If people are familiar with that community, there's something like 30 households maybe up there, and we have struggled up there with getting any sort of broadband for several years. CenturyLink finally came through with the DSL for us several years ago, but the consistency, the quality, the bandwidth has been poor. I think most of us on a good day will get 1 megabit per second download speeds. One of the more frustrating things is, of course, the main access up there is the Park Service road, the Parkway, and the Park Service 2 or so years ago put in, I think, a large fiber connection up to their ranger housing and the visitor center, and there's been some efforts to try to get them to allow us to access some of that without success. So it's been an ongoing issue. Someone like myself who relies on broadband or the best broadband I can get to access the the hospital electronic medical records so that I can work at home. It's particularly frustrating. There's other people up there as well that kind of struggle with the same access for their work. So it's been a problem.
Okay. Anybody else?
Thank you, Joe. I do see that Karen has her hand raised as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and those who are part of the broadband team have heard me talk about this a number of times, but I live just west of Port Angeles in the urban growth area. I'm east of the Elwha, and about 6.5 miles from the courthouse. And was told when I bought my house that yes, there's good internet available, no problem. It's CenturyLink, no issue. And when I contacted CenturyLink, they said, "Oh, we're maxed out on service to your area." So I was not able to get on with CenturyLink, which turned out in some ways to be a blessing. So I found a wireless provider, Crestcom, a small local wireless provider. And in order to get access, they had to put a radio 85 feet up in a Douglas fir tree on my property. And we won't talk about what the expense was for the purchase of the radio and the guy to climb the tree and the wire to my house. But I still don't have broadband speeds. I think it's about 18 Mbps is my general download, and about 3 up. And that's enough that I'm able to do to telecommute reasonably well. Occasionally, I get that sign that says, your internet connection is unstable. But for the most part, it works reasonably well. Since that time, CenturyLink has started offering service in my area again, but I'm told by neighbors that it's very, very, very slow, well under 10. On the other hand, I have another neighbor who lives 3 miles away and who lives actually on Lower Elwha Road. And she has CenturyLink DSL, and her speeds are quite good comparatively. So it really is very hit or miss.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Karen. I guess I'd have a question for, if nobody else has their hand raised, for Mark. From the business side, what are you seeing from the business people that you talk to? Because you talked about needing to expand the bandwidth. What are you thinking would be the appropriate expansion? I remember the anecdote about somebody needed a gig, and you're right. In urban areas, they can get a gig symmetrical for not a whole lot, but much different, out in the Clallam. Any thoughts on that from a business perspective?
Yeah, I could share that that most of our businesses, they find a way to get access to the bandwidth that they need, and I think they basically conduct business within the parameters of what they can actually figure out. The issue is more of aspirational. So it's kind of like if you build it, they will come. It's kind of a philosophy. So if we were to increase bandwidth, we would actually be able to attract businesses that require a little bit more. Some of the businesses that are here would probably be able to expand services that they do provide beyond what they already do. I know we have quite a few businesses here that are at home type, like computer programmers and that kind of thing that work for companies in California, for example. And they find a way to make that work in terms of being able to do their computer programming, that sort of stuff, which I'm not technical, so I don't, I'm not going to be able to throw the language around like you guys can, but I know that they have enough. They find those places, where they actually can get that access. So for me, from my perspective, it's more of and I agree with Jim. I think and the question was asked, what's the priority? Should we worry about getting broadband to everyone, or should we expand the broadband we have? I agree with Jim. I think the priority is really making sure everybody has broadband access, and then secondarily, let's find ways to expand what we already do have. And then there's a company that there is a business in our area that I want to point out, because I don't know if you guys know them, and so I'm just going to throw it out there. It's called Crestcom Broadband, and I don't know if you've heard of them, but they provide, I think, microwave, wireless internet service, and that's how I think about 300 or 400 people in our area here in Port Angeles actually have internet access. They go through Crestcom, but that's something you guys will probably find out as you do your research anyway, but I just wanted to make sure I've got them on your radar because that's one of our local companies that does that sort of thing.
Right. No, we appreciate that. Actually, I think Crestcom is Karen's service provider, and Dick's been talking to, I think it's Bob Pensworth. Is that correct? So yeah, we've been talking to him. So yeah, and if there are others, we've been trying to track down Olipin and Nicola and some of the others that provide service in different areas of the county. If you guys have any names that you'd like us to talk to, we'd be glad to track them down.
Yeah, I would definitely. I'd get a hold of Brian Albright from Albright Managed Networks. He has a lot of. He would be able to provide a lot of insights for you in terms of demand and what his clients require.
Okay.
Brian.
What was the company name?
Albright Managed Networks.
Okay.
They're here in Port Angeles, and he's got quite a few clients and would be able to speak to bandwidth requirements quite a bit, I think.
Okay.
Availability. Because he interacts with all the different providers, so he'd be a good guy to.
Yeah, that'd be great. That was one of the people that we talked to in Forks is the same kind of person out there. He's been working with all the different providers and brokering different services to different businesses.
Right.
Okay.
Mark, just as a point of clarification, the 300 to 400 folks that are on Crestcom, are any of those, is that businesses? Or are you referring to largely residential?
I think it's, I don't know. You have to ask Crestcom, but I think it's mostly residents.
Okay, thank you.
They do have business plans.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Okay.
I see a personal hand raised as well.
Yeah, go ahead. Jim, I think Joe had his hand raised. We'll do some and then we'll bring you back in.
Yeah, you go ahead with Joe and then I'll chime in.
Okay.
Actually, I think it was Councilmember Carr that had her hand raised.
Oh, all right. Go ahead.
Thank you. I figured I'd just chime in. I think I might have shared this story that one of the intricacies about my internet, and I of course live in the city limits, is that when I'm on WebEx, my partner can't use the microwave. And we of course figured this out the hard way during council meeting one night when my internet shorted out. And I generally think I have at least decent internet, and we can have, our, like, both of us do things at the same time. And it was totally a surprise to me when we ran the microwave and it was like just shorted out. It was something I had literally never encountered before and thought it was, sort of funny. And is now a story I share. But the other challenge that we've had, and I think this might speak to the diversity of kinds of housing in our community, is my partner is a liveaboard in the Port Angeles Marina. And because he lives aboard a boat, he doesn't have, internet on his own boat. He can't do that. And we've now essentially moved into my house because I'm unable to work. Like, the internet just won't work where his slip is versus where the internet is at the port or at the marina. And this certainly isn't to throw anybody under the bus at all. I think it just speaks to the different kinds of ways that people get internet, and that there are probably other people who are living either in, shared housing situations where they might be getting good internet in their building, but where they are in location to that internet might be, unchangeable, right? You might be living on the other side of a building or paying for a slip in a marina that, is far enough away from the internet that you just, like, we can't watch movies. I can't load the internet most of the time. And maybe it's something about my device, and that certainly could be a possibility. But I know that since we have sort of a unique situation here, I just wanted to share it with the group that it might be something that folks I certainly hadn't thought about how our liveaboard community gets their internet, and it is certainly a challenge sometimes.
Right. No, we really appreciate that. That actually did come up in the Forks meeting related to marine broadband, essentially how do you get it so it extends beyond the shoreline in a universal way, so it's not just hit or miss based on hotspots. And that's a big issue. I mean, especially for, a community where there's a lot going on around the water. Can I just ask you what type of internet do you have? Is it a DSL or a cable modem service or a wireless service?
At the house, we're on Wave.
Okay.
And to be totally honest with you, and I tend to think I'm like fairly tech literate, but I have no idea if we get broadband or anything like that, which is really embarrassing to say out loud in this meeting. But I did just take the speed test. So
okay.
I at least know that information, and I clearly need to reread my Wave statements and figure out exactly what I'm paying for.
Yeah, see if you're getting what's advertised. There's in the latest FCC broadband report, there's a big difference between advertised speeds and realized speeds. So yeah, you definitely want to maybe talk to them. Okay, all right.
We also have Noah with his hand.
Okay, go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that the Port Angeles Library gets, I believe it's about a 0.5 gig of speed through the K20 fiber that's provided, I think, through Wave. We are looking at improving the internet where we can, and really all of our branches. But I know we've definitely struggled with this. I'd say the customer service that CenturyLink, Wave provide. I don't think that's surprising statement to anyone. Some of the conversations earlier here tonight just reminded me about the city of Anacortes, I believe last year, launched a project where they were providing internet service through the water pipes in the city. They basically ran cable through. I think they were the first city in the nation that did that. And just, it was kind of inspiring for the city to be providing that access at reasonable rates, and using kind of this ingenious idea of just running the fiber through these pipes that already existed to every resident in the city. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Okay, all right. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. It was actually tried a decade or so ago, running it through wastewater pipes and those kinds of things, as a distribution system, a backbone system. But for some reason it lost momentum, but it seems to be picking up again. Noah, in the upstream direction, do you get, it's not 500 symmetrical, is it? What do you get in the upstream direction?
I don't know. It's symmetrical. So Shane Miller's our IT manager. Okay. I think he's on. He's chatting with me here. So it is symmetrical.
It is symmetrical. Okay. All right. That's good. All right. Yeah. That's half the battle.
So just to add to that as well, not personally, but from my public position here, the city of Port Angeles has a gigabit symmetrical fiber to the internet. But as someone was saying, realized speeds and advertised speeds are different. We realize right around 800 megabit with nobody really on the network in the middle of the night. And so a lot of these speeds are in theory, but they don't also include what we call as the overhead in the industry. So what you actually realize on the ground is actually less than the advertised in most cases.
Well, in most contracts will have the infamous up to language in them, so up to a gig. Well, 400 megas up to a gig, right? So
Let's see, Jim, I wanted to come back to you because we had skipped past you. So go ahead.
That's okay. That's all right. No problem. Just looking at this slide reminds me of the Growth Management Act and certain levels of service for certain kinds of utilities, governmental services, et cetera, and so forth. So that may suggest, and backing up for a second, this grant is from the Department of Commerce, State Department of Commerce, which of course has administrative oversight of the Growth Management Act and how it's applied by cities and counties throughout the state. So this suggests to me a kind of a two-tiered planning structure. Number one, which we previously talked about, is a ubiquitous goal of a floor of a certain level of service to anybody, no matter where located in the state. But because the Growth Management Act gives a limited number of tools to cities and counties as far as their comprehensive plan goes, the urban, it's either unincorporated rural county style of planning or an urban growth area style of planning. And if you have an urban growth area, there's a certain number of levels of service that you've got to provide as a government. In the Port Angeles region, there are 3 UGAs, Joyce, Clallam Bay, and CQ. I don't know if you could classify Clallam Bay and CQ as in the Forks region or in the Port Angeles region. They're kind of on the border in my mind anyway.
Okay.
And the Growth Management Act, of course, constrains where residential densities and business densities can exist in a county like ours. So that suggests to me that for the second tier of service, where you want to provide some broadband hotspots, you need to focus on urban growth areas in particular, and I'm thinking of Joyce and Clallam Bay and CQ as 3 examples here in the Port Angeles, either near or far world, and think about the implications for government and expenditure of public resources that might suggest. An urban growth area is going to have a certain level of policing, a certain level of service of transportation facilities, certain number of parks, certain minimal level of water supply and wastewater processing capability. I'm thinking right now Carlsberg, and I lost several square inches of skin in trying to fund a wastewater treatment capability for the UGA of Carlsberg. So there are some implications for city expenditures, county expenditures, private sector expenditures when we think about planning for levels of service of broadband, in particular regional classifications according to the Growth Management Act. So that may suggest a structure, and I may be telling you something you already know, but at least when it relates to Port Angeles, that may structure some thinking about how to think about what happens inside the Port Angeles UGA versus immediately adjacent to the Port Angeles UGA or any other UGA, given Joyce, Clallam Bay, CQ, et cetera. And then there's sort of a basic regional, urban, rural level of service, and that creates a set of expectations for people in their choice of where to live. So what jumps out at me from this slide is what I've just relayed to you in kind of a stream of consciousness.
No, listen, I appreciate that, and there is a fair amount of history around broadband planning as it relates to comprehensive planning and matching the two. So it's certainly something to look at, and again, based on resources, they're when you have to determine where to put them, sometimes following that kind of comprehensive planning structure is a good way to go.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. No,
and then,
I appreciate that.
And then one final thought: there are certain legal authorities right now for PUDs and port districts regarding broadband, at least in the wholesale aspect of broadband. So those districts, at least in our county, are county-wide, except for the PUD, which of course does not include the city of Port Angeles. The city of Port Angeles has its own utility, electrical utility. So this is a multi-layered kind of planning process, and that's exactly what I'm trying to pinpoint here. It has to include several different aspects of how the comprehensive plan is structured and who does what in accordance with the comprehensive plan.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's something, when you look at what the PUDs are doing around the state, there are different ways that they're approaching things based on differences, within their, geographical and territorial service area. So that's certainly something, and Dave again is on our broadband team, and we've looked at some things so far and have a number of things to explore with them. Okay. All right. No, that's great.
Mark, if I could, I'd like to share another perspective that I think might be helpful to your team and your planning and this roadmap. And that is that Port Angeles is actually undergoing a pretty significant renaissance. So especially in the downtown district, about $130 million of private monies going into the downtown for the development and creation of several different facilities, which will require probably high levels of broadband, and that includes a performing arts center that's underway, a new hotel in the downtown, a condominium structure with about 70 condominiums in the downtown area, projects of private investment. And then of course there's others in the city limits itself as well, but the total is around $140 million over the next couple of years. So I just want to make that point because it's something to keep in mind. We are rural, but there's a lot happening here, and the game, the level is raising, I guess. And I want to just finish this point by kind of piggybacking on what Navarro was talking about in the maritime environment. I know because I've been working with the Port of Port Angeles on an expansion of their services to the super yacht community. So we have a super yacht right now in our port, and they are courting this business area. The Port of Port Angeles is. And they're working all the different aspects of that, everything from the cost of gasoline for the boats and everything else and other services. But it occurs to me here listening to Navarro that these super yachts that come in, they're gonna kind of like expect fairly high bandwidth access to the internet as well. They're not gonna hang around too long for slow speeds,
Right.
That's something else just to keep in mind. I just wanted to share that that's going on here, and there's a lot happening in terms of that. We're not just kind of like sleepy rural, staying on course. We're actually growing and in significant ways.
Okay. No, I appreciate the perspective because you're right. As you see growth and renewal, broadband is expected as part of that. I would imagine in these condominiums, I don't know whether they're being pre-wired or what kind of service levels they're going to have, but the last condominium I lived in was a brand new facility, and it already was completely wired with fiber, so that I had a little 1 gig symmetrical terminal in my little 2-bedroom condo. So yeah, you're gonna see that there's going to be a push for that, I would think. Okay. All right. So Dick, why don't we go to the next slide? I think we've gotten the answer to this question. So it doesn't meet today's needs, and kind of where it's falling short. The one thing that we absolutely want you to do, and have all your neighbors, business associates, everybody that you can get to do, is to go ahead and take this state speed test, because as the broadband office tells us, again, they're going to use this at some point when they compile it all together to help target efforts from the state to expand broadband. And Dick, you want to just show them the current what you did as far as a speed test?
Yeah, the way this works is the area that shows up on the map, as you can see there, right around Port Angeles, those numbers that are here are all related to the area shown on the map. So if you zoom out a little bit farther, these numbers change and will get bigger. And it shows that 164 people within this area of the map have taken the broadband test. And this is 2 days old, something like that, a day and a half old. So it hasn't probably changed a lot. This one is, and they're kind of hard to see. This is how many have broadband out of the 164. This is the number that don't have it. This is the highest speed in the forward direction, in the return direction, and then these are the averages down here. And ultimately what we're going to do is take this map and try to promote a lot more dots on the map. Each dot represents a test taken, and get a real good feel for where broadband is and where it isn't, and what kind of speeds are seen. These numbers are a little bit flawed, and we're going to work with the state to try to tune it up a little bit. All of these red dots down in here, the places where you would expect them, those are below broadband. So there's obviously a lot more than 16 tests taken that aren't broadband, but we'll work with the state and try to get the raw data from them and make this a little bit more usable for us.
Right. Yeah, and we don't think that they throw out the highs. So yeah. The averages may be skewed a little bit by the gig symmetrical people that are taking it. I'm assuming that's what that is, with the overhead factored in for the 921 megabits.
Well, okay. that could be theoretically anyway, a wave broadband or a CenturyLink fiber to the home.
Right. And
I've seen in other places though where it's like 2.4 gig. That's somebody at the PUD took a test, I think, and that blows the averages right out of the water. So
yeah,
we want to try to pull those out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So please take the speed test for us. And again, you can get to it by directly going to their page, or going through the Broadband Team's webpage.
Yeah, the link that I had up there, it's a really long link. It's either go through the Broadband Team's web page, and that, or Washington Broadband Office. You can get there that way too. Those are easier to remember than a link. So either of those ways will get you there.
Okay. All right. So just go ahead.
Let me just say, you'll probably see a jump in those numbers, because I'm going to promote this to our business community, and that's over 400 businesses. So you should see those numbers go up pretty good over the next couple of weeks. And then, yeah.
And encourage people, Mark, if you would, encourage people to take it where they have broadband, but if to different people on the meeting here, even out somewhere where you don't get broadband, you get dial-up, you get 2 or 3 meg down. Go ahead and take the test at those places too, because that documents where it isn't, and that's every bit as important, if not more, than where it is. So
Okay, we'll do that. And a question for you guys: do we have access to this the screen there? I mean, does this Commerce have a web page where you can actually see the current results of the survey?
If you go to the Washington broadband office, you'll see this. And it starts out, it's statewide, and then you just zoom in, you'll figure it out pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can really hone in on any area, and it'll give you the subset report for that particular area. The one thing we'd like to be able to get a hold of is the actual spreadsheets, so we could look at particular places and particular speeds. I don't know whether the state will allow us to do that, but that's a discussion we're going to have with them, because we think that would be helpful.
And Tom, I did figure out, if you go on to one of these dots, of course, this is just a screen capture, so I can't do it, but if you go on to one of these dots and left click, it tells you what that speed test resulted in.
For that particular.
Yep.
Okay, that's good.
Yep.
That will be very helpful.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Pam just posted the website, so people could just paste it and click. Thank you. All right. So we're going to move on to the next curb question. And that's, if you do have broadband, how do you use it now? And, for us, for our purposes, even if you have sub broadband, how do you use it now? What I'd like to do is turn it back over to Connie and kind of walk through what we decided to do is sort of structure this around, please tell us anything that you use it for, but we wanted to structure it around the things that we know are kind of three critical things: telehealth, telelearning, teleeducation, and telework. So any of you out there, with any experience in this, whether you're parents of school kids and what's going on there, or I think I saw Emma out there from Peninsula College, and then also Joe, I know you're a physician. We'd love to have you weigh in on how this is working for you in the current pandemic with these three critical applications. Connie, you want to go ahead and launch into that?
Yeah, we've heard really good examples. I appreciate, Joe, about your neighborhood and the issue you have there, teleworking, that you shared. But those are the three big buckets we're looking at. If people could offer some observations about telehealth, telelearning, and that's K through higher ed, and telework, and your experiences in Port Angeles.
I think at this point, if I could get my awesome host to unmute Joe at this time. Perhaps Joe isn't ready to speak to us, but I wanted to.
Well, anybody can jump in on make observations. We're trying to find, we want to include some specific examples. So you've given several tonight, but we want to take a minute and just pause here and see if there are other examples that people would like to share out of either of those three buckets.
We went ahead and elevated Pam and Joe to the panel as well, so that they can speak whenever they like.
Okay. Connie, I'm going to throw out something that I don't think has come up yet, which is the issue of data caps. I have been getting good enough speed to telework for the most part, but I had a plan that had a data cap on it, and it was a pretty high data cap. But I was on one very, very large Zoom meeting where it was not done as a webinar, it was done with all of us.
30 minutes at 8 o'clock.
And used probably 2 months worth of data during that 1 2-hour meeting, and called my provider in a panic. Crestcom has ended up setting up a plan that has a little bit lower speed but is without data caps. And so that's working for me currently. But I think there are a lot of people who are in that boat of having a provider that where their service comes with a data cap. And if you're trying to do telelearning, telework, any of those kinds of things, you can't really do it effectively with a cap on your data.
Yeah, that's a great point, Karen. So I'll be sure and make notes about network management just generally and its impact, especially if you're already on a limited broadband connection. Any other thoughts on telework or telehealth? I don't know if anyone else is in the healthcare or a user that wanted to share, and then the telelearning experience. And I'll throw in there the regional library as well. I know you mentioned that you weren't open to patrons right now, but you might have people using your Wi-Fi there or other services for the parking lot.
Yeah, I can touch on that. We definitely are continuing to serve a lot of people. We have cars in our parking lot on a regular basis, everything, and students as well, kids, they're not just in their cars. We have picnic tables around the buildings, and that internet is getting used at all of our branches on a pretty regular basis. And I think with the school district back in the spring, they definitely tried to provide increased access by putting hotspots on buses around the community and providing, they're providing additional access right now, but we've continued to see that and we've heard directly from parents that they'll bring, send their kids to sit outside the library and access the internet. And I think one of the things I know I was discussing with some of our staff earlier, even before we had to close due to COVID, we were seeing more and more people just with their own devices. So it's like people can, they can afford cheap laptops, or they have, cheap, affordable smartphones. And so they're not as dependent on our public computers as much. They can't afford the internet service, and so that's why they're coming to the library to use their own personal device there. And then we definitely saw when we kind of sent staff home to work from home and telework, definitely issues with the broadband. Like I mentioned earlier, around outside of the city, really, where we then had to issue hotspots to staff so they could actually telework because the internet service they had was just not reliable at home. And then I know you have staff that are teleworking that have had issues where they have kids at home now that are, on the Zoom calls at the same time they are, and spouses as well. And it kind of falls apart once all of them are trying to, access all this content at the same time. So.
And Noah, you made the investment in the equipment necessary to set up the hotspots for your employees?
Yeah, we luckily already had a handful of them, so it wasn't something that we had to provide to every employee, but we had we did buy additional ones. We did make that investment, and the state library actually provided additional ones through a grant with CARES Act funding as well during the summer, and we did make the decision to kind of focus on providing those for our employees as well, just so they could continue working.
Noah, what do they connect to?
The hotspots are through Verizon.
Okay.
Yeah. That seems to be the best kind of wireless service, I think, in this area.
Cellular, anyway.
Yeah, cellular. Exactly.
Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah, hello. I'm not sure if I'm available for you guys to hear or not. This is Joe Polera.
Yep.
Oh, we can hear you.
Hear ya.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm actually at the hospital now at work, so I apologize if there's any background interference with announcements overhead. But in fact, I wouldn't be able to do this from my home because my bandwidth isn't good enough. So just briefly, my telehealth needs accessing the hospital's electronic medical records so that I can either answer phone calls or work on patient charts at home. And then I have two school-age children, one 7th grader, one high school freshman, who are, of course, online schooling at home. And yeah, so, in my case, the bandwidth is poor enough that one of the three of us can be doing something, but anytime more than one does anything that requires any significant bandwidth, of course, it doesn't work. So that's an unfortunate limitation of our situation up at Lake Don.
Yeah, and Joe, just to kind of segue off of what Mark was going to do for us, if you could get your neighbors to take that bandwidth test, that would be very helpful to.
I think actually one of my neighbors, Mary Wegman, who pointed me to this direction, I volunteered to attend this meeting. I think she's already sent out that to our neighbors, but I will send another reminder out to people to try to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Helpful. Thank you. Any other feedback before we move to the solutions part that we're exploring? Why don't we go ahead, Tom, and I'll toss it back to you. And if other folks can put things in the chat box if you think of something else.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Connie. Just also on the telework front, we know that, that's been an issue for not just small and medium businesses, but large businesses where people are trying to telework back in, and they have great capabilities at their business, but not necessarily at their house. And then also for institutions, for government and educational employees, faculty, staff. I mean, we've heard about students that have access, but the teachers don't necessarily have the access, or the faculty. So any thoughts on telework before we move to the sort of next and the third part of our discussion? Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and move on. Dick, you want to? Okay. So we're looking at a lot of things. That's why we titled this "Working to Get There." We're talking to the ISPs, and again, if you have any that we haven't talked to, or any names like we've heard this evening, that would be really helpful as we track people down. And we're certainly willing to. I know sometimes they're concerned about their competition. We're certainly willing to sign NDAs with them so that we can get the information we need to be able to make good decisions on what's available and what's not available. Let's see, the PUD, I know Dave was on the phone. I've lost my attendee list, so I don't know if Dave's still on the phone, but Dave, if you are, and you raised your hand, if you want to just talk about, I know, I believe that the application wasn't successful for the PUD, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what the PUD had planned, and kind of, some of the potential efforts down the road.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I coming through?
Yes.
Yeah, we did apply for the State Department of Commerce grant, along with a number of other tribes, PUDs, and other entities. And there was a lot of applicants, and I think only 5 got funded. In fact, we applied for $4.1 million to put in a fiber backbone from the Elwha River out to Forks and La Push. And our proposal was rated pretty high. There's actually a spreadsheet of the results and scoring of the applicants on the Department of Commerce's website. And the applicant that got the most money, in fact, got, I think, about 60% of the money that was available was the Kalispel tribe over in Pend Oreille County, northeastern Washington, which in contrast to our application, I mean, when I worked for Seattle City Light 20 years ago, I did a project joint venture with Pend Oreille PUD and NOAANET that ran a 100-mile fiber line from Spokane up to the Canadian border, where Seattle City Light has its largest dam, Boundary Dam. And so they've had a fiber backbone that is second to none for 20 years out there in Pend Oreille County, which is considerably smaller than this county. So they got a $5 million grant to improve service in a small part of the county there. So that was where a lot of the money went for that. And, we're definitely going to be looking at other opportunities to apply for grants for this fiber backbone and other fiber expansions.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you for that, Dave. Yeah, I think, as Karen and I have discussed, having written some grants and been involved in some grant writing, sometimes it's like you have to go through the process. They have to see who you are. They have to rate you highly. And then you keep getting, closer and closer, as time goes on. So I'm hoping, because I think you guys did a great effort. I'm hoping that the state, the Public Works Board noticed that. And then the next time around, when funding comes through again, that they will be, they will be affirmative. And I also think we're going to see, again, I think after the first of the year, I think there's a real push in a lot of quarters at the federal level to develop more broadband funding. There was a recent round of private funding, for those investing in the Citizens Band radio service and other wireless technology that uses unused spectrum in that bandwidth. And as some of you who might have been CBers way back when, or maybe still are, that's at much lower frequencies, so it travels farther and has really good resiliency. So, some of the implementations that we've seen, initial implementations of CBRS technology have been very promising in delivering high capacity communications to rural areas. So we're hoping that comes around as well. The tribes, and I know that a number of you are familiar with what the HO have been doing with Starlink, and I know the Macaw have been involved in some of their own trials. So one of the things, maybe I'll defer to Karen. Karen, I know you don't speak on behalf of the tribes, but I know you know pretty much what's going on there. If you want to just chime in with what you know about some of the things they're doing.
Sure, I can do that. I think everybody has probably seen some of the information coming out about the HO's relationship with Starlink. They have I was on a call recently with Melvin John Ashew, who's the vice chair of the HO and actively involved in the project. And he said that they've got a 3-year with Starlink to be beta testers essentially for the system. And at this point, they've been given, I think, 30 of the satellite radios that will link up with Starlink. And when they initially hooked up, the speed was pretty good, but they were having, they'd be up for 15 minutes and then there'd be a gap of 20 minutes with no service and then up for another 15 because of how few satellites there were. But as they've gotten more satellites launched, now they're up pretty much all of the time. And they are getting speeds of, close to a gig. I'm sorry, not a gig, 100 megs, and with the big difference there, 100 megs, with very little latency. So they'll be installing additional radios and participating in this project, for the next 3 years. I also saw an article that Starlink is going to be opening up for additional beta testers. I actually was on the email list or signed up to be emailed when beta testing was available in my particular area, and I've not been contacted. So apparently, if you are, in the section of Clallam County that I'm in, it's not yet available. But if you want to be a beta tester and it is available in your area, they're offering, I think it's $99 a month, but it's $500 for the radio and the router that you need. So there is an upfront investment for sure. That will probably come down over time, I would imagine. So, and I will also say that Melvin John was very clear that they are not abandoning efforts at fiber and microwave, even though they're getting this Starlink relationship, that they were with some of their other projects because they want to have redundancy. So that's still in the works for them. The Macaw took advantage of, there was a special auction of 2.5 gigahertz spectrum that was unutilized or underutilized. It was available only to tribes, and so they took advantage of that and have access to this spectrum. And they also are in the process of really basically beta testing it. So they've got, I think, the last time I talked to Crystal, they had, I think, about a dozen households and administrative buildings hooked up to it. And they were getting pretty good speeds as well. And they were currently using the lower LWAs to pull down and then beam it to another tower that they had at the Macaw lands, because the LWA have a taller tower. And so I think the Macaw were looking at trying to install another tower of their own, and then also to build out so that more people would have access. So I think that's very good news for what have been some of the most unserved or underserved areas of the county. And as they learn from what they're doing, it may help inform some of what the rest of us may have to look forward to.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Karen. And that's really one of the things that again, looking at what they're doing, looking at how that might translate into some of the things that we could do, where there might be, for instance, sharing a tower that might be, in one direction providing services to the tribes, and another direction providing services to residents out in the unincorporated county. So we'll continue to look at those things and talk with them and work with them. Institutions and large businesses, we've had some success in other projects aggregating demand. We talked with the folks in Forks about that. They've attempted to do that before. I mean, some of that's going to depend on the provider, but we're going to look at some different ways with potentially some new technologies to do that. And certainly want to do that, throughout the county, within the Port Angeles area, if it makes sense, especially with the current, fiber capabilities that are inside of the city of Port Angeles, and then, potential expansion outside, things like that. The potential technologies for expansion, we're really looking at everything, and over the planning horizon, for a project like this, again, to make it sustainable, you have to look at technology shifts, and you have to look at all possible, potentials. In the SQUIM meeting tomorrow, there's a new player, apparently. We don't know much about them, but they've indicated that they want to participate in the SQUIM meeting tomorrow. So we'll find out about them. They're apparently a new wireless provider, but also are looking at fiber implementation. So again, we don't know really anything about them except that they've signed up to attend the meeting. So we'll find out. But that's part of what we want to do too, is see what kind of relationships we can explore with some who have experience in developing these types of systems, and may see an opportunity here, to go places where others haven't, based on their business case. Okay. The next thing is really just the business case, and I know certainly Mark and Jim, you guys are extremely familiar with this. We have to look at all of these pieces in order to develop a sustainable concept. Return on investment. The issue with a lot of companies these days, especially the bigger ones, like a CenturyLink or like a Wave, with their shareholders. And shareholder value is not built based on long, cost recovery periods, whereas that was definitely not the case, decades ago when systems were being built out. Even cable television systems, which now are today the backbone of how most people get their broadband, and the cable providers together provide, I think it's somewhere around 2/3 of the broadband in this country. Through their hybrid fiber coax platforms and directly through fiber where they provide business services. But their first 15 years of development, there was zero return on investment. They actually developed a whole new concept of financing, with Wall Street when they went out for public investment called free cash flow. Which basically was just, we're going to generate a lot of cash. We're going to put it where it's needed. You won't see much return on your investment until the next 15 years. So in the first 15 years of their existence, they really were just living to build those systems. But after that, some of them became cash cows. Broadband is their most profitable service, and it has a huge profit margin once it's implemented. Unlike cable television, which has a huge amount of programming cost, and landline phone, which was another one of their, initial forays, but there just aren't that many people taking landlines anymore. So we'll look at those kinds of things and see, what kinds of returns and what kinds of business cases can be made and what's being done in other places. One of the things we're looking at are best practices, not just in Washington State, but around the country. Part of that's price points for service. We've heard, in some of the studies we've done in other areas, that there are thresholds, but there are different thresholds in different places. It depends on the necessity, the perceived need, other adoption characteristics. Connie, you want to talk about that? I mean, it goes into the whole access to the internet piece, but really also comes down to making the business case.
This is part of the effort. Tom shared that one of the things that we've been successful at is aggregating. And, when you're thinking about the return on investment, there's definitely a pricing model that's, that anything that we can do in terms of infrastructure support, whether that's permitting, whether that's building and placing towers, or, we're getting folks together to agree on how they're going to support the infrastructure. And then the commitments, to be an anchor tenant on the network, to work with the provider, have all been value added in terms of bringing people to the table to create a scenario, and usually multiple scenarios for the different needs that the community has. There's always, because of the nature of the way in which the broadband industry operates, when you've got large providers, folks like Crestcom and are nervous about Verizon, so they do need commitments from the community, because, Verizon could make a move that could, basically put them at the margin after making significant investments as a small business. So that's really what they're looking for, the assurances and a roadmap in order to make the investments in the community.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Connie. Dick, you want to do the next slide? So obviously this is critical, the potential funding sources. And again, our experience has been that this is really one of those funds that, anyway, bottom line, it requires a lot of different types of funding to make this happen, whether it's a private capital investment, by a private provider, even as part of a public-private partnership where the public entity is providing either assets or funding as well. Grants, which are always the best from a lot of different perspectives, because they have that public policy role and provide the one of the more expedient paths. And then loans, especially the low interest loans, come from the USDA or the RUS program, can be quite effective too. Some entities, even at the low interest, don't necessarily want to be beholden to the government on a loan. So that always takes some more visionary thinking sometimes, but we'll be looking at all those sources. Again, there's best practices out there. And one of the things that we typically build into the business model is different shifts in funding based on availability. And again, we are projecting that, once this thing goes into action, that there will be some federal funding available, that there will be a real big push, I think, to expand broadband access in the beginning of the 2021s and up through the rest of the 2020s. So one of the things we wanted to do as a wrap up, and Dick, you want to go to the next slide, is how can we help each other? We've embarked on this project working with the broadband team. How can we engage you to work with us, to have the best possible outcome. So one of the things is that we'll be looking at some adoption spurring efforts, and that may be, folks that currently indicate no need, no desire, or those that, and we've talked about this with the team, those that could have, greater access, but don't necessarily want to invest in it for whatever reason, those kinds of things, because adoption spurs demand, and demand spurs implementation. So that's one of the things that we want to engage the group on. Take the state speed test, as we talked about, take the team survey to provide data. And that's the direct link to the survey without necessarily having to go through the website. Pam, if you're still out there and want to post that on the chat, that would be great. And it's a real easy survey to fill out. It might take you 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on how much info you want to tell us. But because there's so many check boxes, it makes it easy, but it also makes it easy to analyze and get some consensus data. And that's really helpful from the CURB requirements perspective. Think about joint efforts, and that would be things where we could aggregate some demand. We could look at, common goals. A lot of times, and I know the state is looking at this with the 1 gig symmetrical to anchor institutions. How can they, for example, because they typically leverage private entities to help expand that, such as working with CenturyLink and others on the K through 20 network, Net, which is a combination of lots of different network resources. One of the things that might do, depending on what resources they use, is sometimes building that to anchor institutions expands backbone capacity for providers to come in and serve residents and businesses along the way. Okay, Dick, next slide. All right, phased expansion. One of the things we're more than likely going to have to do, and this goes back to Jim's discussion about how you plan this and how it aligns with other types of services, is we're going to have to look at phased expansion unless the federal or state government drops not just millions but tens of millions of dollars on us. And where do we put the priorities? What would be the most beneficial to the county and its residents and businesses? Once we work this through with the team, we need you to help vet the scenarios. Tell us where you think that there might be a trap door or something that we put forward doesn't look sustainable to you. That kind of thing. And then finally, once we all agree, once we have this sort of common thing, the way you help build momentum is to get some common support for that. So we'll want to, really get some enthusiasm behind what the team and the communities decide. And that will help us to advocate, especially at the state level and potentially at the federal level. Just a nod to Mary Jane and the congressman. He attended one of our team meetings in August and was very, very interested in what we were doing and what we had to say. And so I know we've got, some advocates at the federal level as well. Okay, next steps really is for us to take this information, put it into a needs set, work on the gap maps, and then vet them with you. So that'll be the next thing that we'll be seeking some input from you is to, through Todd and through some of the other team members, get these maps out for viewing and let people say, well, no, I'm looking at that, and you've got me in a broadband area, and I can't get anything. Or you don't have me, and I've got fiber running, past my front door, that kind of thing. So that's really the next step here, and then helping us vet things as we bring them through. And finally, any input that you have beyond this meeting, feel free to send it directly to us or through Todd at the City of Port Angeles, and that would be very helpful to us. Okay, so that's how we're embarking. I know I've already got you guys 2 minutes over. So the one thing I would just say is if anybody had anything they wanted to say, as kind of a last thing for the evening, or if there was something we didn't cover, I want to make sure you get a chance to say it before we sign off.
I just want to say thank you to everyone for not only attending, but participating tonight. Again, reach out to myself or any of the team members. The link on the city website is a big banner. You can't miss it. So cityofpa.us, that'll get you to the broadband team site. Again, thank you, everyone. And I really appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks for participating. And we'll keep moving down the road.
Thank you.
Have a good night.